Do you think UFOs, the paranormal, weird history, cryptozoology, and outsider art are pretty darn cool? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to High Strangeness with your host, Steve Berg.
The video version. Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to another episode of High Strangeness. Today, I have my new buddy, Christie Ayers, on, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about Christie before she starts telling you a little bit about herself. Christie Ayers started her paranormal journey just over 7 years ago. In those 7 years, she has been on the Travel Channel shows, Destination Fear, Most Terrifying Places in America. Christie created a small series called Buried Alive Paranormal that was eventually picked up by Nick Groff on Amazon Prime. She has also worked on several haunted locations to help build them up and bring people in. She created an event company that is geared towards helping locations gain necessary funding to keep these historical locations running and up to code. She also tends to focus on paranormal events, on giving back to local communities. Beautiful thing. During COVID lockdowns, Christie sold everything she owned and took to living on the road. The goal was to live small for herself in order to do big for others. Wow, that's wonderful. This earned her the name The Para-Gypsy. Currently, she is working on a new series that is meant to tell her story and how it's all tied up into paranormal investigating. She is also getting ready to publish a book that tells about her life's journey in escaping from a life of hell on earth. This book and series are meant to help others through their struggles, to find confidence in themselves, and to help them on their journey. She believes it is time to seek our own spirits. Ooh, I like everything that bio had. No notes. I have no notes on that.
That's okay.
It was wonderful.
I love it anyway. It's okay.
I love it. Well, oh my God, where do we even start? So, folks, right before we started recording, we were just talking, and I was telling her, like, oh, I knew you lived in the Midwest, right? And I was like, oh, well, hey, I live in Omaha, so I would love to. And she's like, wait, I'm in Omaha right now.
Yeah.
And I'm like, the Midwest is a big place. And I just thought that was kind of amazing. So I thought you lived somewhere in Kansas. You were in Kansas, but like at some point.
Yes, I was in Kansas for a little while. I lived at the Hotel Josephine for a little bit because she was struggling. Unfortunately, she hired me on too late. And so by the time she hired me on, the financial situation of the place was so dire that she ended up having to sell it. But I did live there for like a few months in the middle of winter, and it felt like The Shining.
Yeah. Well, Kansas, I mean, it was kind of a brutal winter in the Midwest last year.
It was. I mean, Kansas obviously doesn't get, I guess, as brutal as Omaha can.
Yeah.
But there were
days
on end where I wouldn't see a person or really hear from a person.
Right.
And you can only like feel so comforted over like the computer or the phone. But to have, like actual human contact. So, people were literally photoshopping me like in the door with the axe. I was like, who wore it better? I won that one.
Yeah, I mean, Omaha is like, a big enough city to where like I just see people all the time. Like, and I live like close to downtown, so there's a lot of people around. But like, there are places in the Midwest where like you could definitely not see anyone for a whole season.
Yeah, absolutely.
That would play with my head a little bit. As much as I like always like fantasize about having all this like free time to read and just do my own thing.
Right?
I'd freak out in 2 days.
Yeah, pretty much. And like what happens to is like it's a haunted hotel. So then like every time you hear, I will tell you that I know how to run steam boilers now. I know everything there is to know about a steam boiler.
This is handy stuff.
Work.
Look, I'll tell you what. If the grid goes down, people are gonna be calling you.
Yeah, they probably will. I can live totally off the grid. It's what I've been doing for pretty much the last 4 years, sort of.
Well, I would kind of like to start there. So, in the bio we just read, like, you at some point, what's weird, I think with COVID, I mean, like I moved from LA back to Omaha. I think a lot of people had these kind of like forced epiphanies when we, thought because we had time to think about it and the world was getting real weird. But yours came in the shape of selling selling everything and hitting the road.
Yeah. Well, well, when the book comes out, because I know like everybody's going to think the book is about ghost hunting, but it's actually not. Eventually, because I want to do like a series where eventually it leads to like where I am at now in life. But the book talks about this situation. I was very young. I was 14 years old. I met the man that I would eventually marry, but he was 20. By the time I was 23 years old, I was a widow with 4 kids and coming out of one of the absolute worst abuse situations a lot of people have ever heard of. Like it's fascinating to me because I'm like, I still go to therapy once in a while for stuff that happened to me. And it's just fascinating to me. The therapists are just like, wow, like that's crazy. And
Yeah.
last session I had, she was like, every day you come in here so happy and I just don't get it. And I'm like, neither do I. But I think that absolute control that I had when I was with him and I was never allowed to be myself or feel myself or anything, it just led to this urging in myself for years where I just wanted to like go away.
Right.
And so when I was sitting in this apartment during lockdowns, my kids had grown up. I had just sold the house. And so I'm sitting in this 2-bedroom apartment, like, why do I have all this stuff? Why do I have 2 bedrooms? I didn't want any of it anymore. It just seemed very confining. And I was like, you know what? I would rather be out on the road, living the life I want to live and helping people. And so this idea of living little so you can do big kind of is what came out of it. And so I sold everything I own. I started doing paranormal events all over the country, picking up odd jobs. I also have a degree in film production and graphic design and sound design and all of that. So with odd jobs and with the event company, whatever, I was able to kind of survive like that. And so for a while, it was the whole idea of like van life.
Yeah.
But what happened, this most amazing thing happened. I started getting messages and phone calls from people. I have a place for you to stay. Come stay here. Come stay here. I had a friend who built a little tiny home in her backyard in Florida, who I would go down there every, winter, and I'd be down there. And I've friends in New Orleans and New Mexico, just pretty much every state in the country. So the problem then became, I would be like, they probably want me to leave. Like, I've been here for a month, because I'd be like, okay, well, here's the thing. If I come, I'll be there for about a month, maybe 2 months, whatever. And you have to be okay with that. And they would be like, yeah, totally. So then I'm like, they're probably so glad to get rid of me. Like 10 minutes into me being on the road, can you come back?
Oh, that's so, yeah.
It's been that way everywhere I go, and I always feel bad because there's so many people, when you coming back, when you coming back, when you coming back. And I'm like, I don't know when I'm coming back.
But you'll be back. Yeah. I mean, like basically, yeah, this is like, you're like, your own Grateful Dead. Like just touring around, stopping by, bringing people joy, then hitting the road again. It's like, I'll be back when I can, man.
But it's so funny. Like, I never in a million years, I mean, I think the one thing that I want to do more than anything is to make people laugh and smile and enjoy life and be happy. And I never thought that everything that I came through, somehow or another, I'd be able to do that. And so it's amazing. Like, I absolutely love it.
I love that. I mean, like, and the world needs more of that, sister. Let me tell you, it's and then I'm not trying to be dystopian here, but like, I'm also not blind to the fact that there's a lot of challenges going on in this world right now. And I think positivity, making people laugh, is a very noble goal.
Yes. Well, and it's not to say like, I mean, this is what people see. Like, I obviously have my days and I have my moments, and I have some very close friends who help me through those days and those moments. And that's why I'm back in therapy. Writing the book is ultimately what sent me back to therapy, because memories came back and whatever. And, I'm a huge believer that no matter what I've been through in life, it is not an excuse to treat people poorly.
Yes.
And so to get a handle on that, I make sure that what I'm doing is I always have a place to put whatever this is, and it's in an appropriate place. And that way, whatever has harmed me will never harm another person ever again, including my kids. So that's why I go.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think what you're doing is amazing. I love this.
Yeah, thanks.
I mean, it really is. And I mean, like, I am not trying to ham fist the paranormal into this, but like, have you found, like, chasing mysteries and looking into the strange and unusual and kind of seeking it out and learning more and researching, has been a form, like, is cathartic for you?
It actually has been. It's funny because I was a worship leader for 10 years, and I was ridiculed for my love of paranormal and weird things and whatever. But I've actually found that the paranormal field, I end up in more dark, creepy basements with people pouring out their hearts to me and healing people more than I
Yeah.
ever have. It's like this whole, it's a very spiritual thing if you let it be.
Uh-huh.
Um, I know there's always those people who want to turn it into this crazy darkness that they want it to be because of whatever reason.
Right.
But the truth of the matter is I feel like everybody in the paranormal is there because there's this deep-seated spirituality where, we're there trying to find, what happens after you die. I mean, that's like
Yeah.
the core of humans is life and
Right.
death. And, everybody wants the answer. Everybody wants to be comfortable with that. And, so I think that searching part of it is so it's good for all of us just in general. So yeah.
I think so too. And and like I have not like I have been a voracious reader and like like on my own researching this stuff for as long as I can remember. I don't really, like since I was a kid. And what I've found in the last like 3 or 4 years since I kind of started like meeting people and like speaking at some conferences and stuff is these are some of the smartest, most philosophical people I've ever met in my life.
Hmm.
Now, there's definitely, I'm not saying that's the rule for everyone because there's definitely problematic people in these fields, but some of my best friends I'll ever have are, I've met through our interest in UFOs or cryptids or the paranormal.
Yes,
And I think it's beautiful.
it is because those are the people who aren't sitting there on, and as a realist, I'm saying this, they're not sitting there going, well, this can't be true. They're saying, but what if it is?
Right.
And that's the thing, right? It's always, but what if it is?
Right.
Because if it is, then, just like Edison, what if I could make a light bulb, or what if I could, Alexander, what if I
Right.
could make a telephone?
Yeah.
All these people who invented something, they sat there and said, what if?
Right.
Um, what if you
Y-
fail? Well, then you just know it didn't work and you find something else.
That's exactly right. That's
Yeah.
exactly, well, it is. I also think it's just any one of these topics, choose any one of them within this strange and unusual field, the Fortean field, and it will, if you start looking into it seriously, it will just lead you to other aspects of human life. You'll have to start reading about philosophy. You'll have to start reading about ancient cultures and belief systems and folklore. It leads you down a great path, I think.
Yes. Oh, and I love the history. Like for me, that's what it is about the locations. Because a lot of times you walk into a location, they don't even know their own history. And so to be able to like investigate, and I tell you, every building will give you some answers. You'll get an EVP or so you're like, what does that mean? And then you just start looking it up, and before you know it, you find a link to the building you're at. And so that's been some of the coolest things ever. Like whole entire story. I mean, that's what we're supposed to be doing, right? Is like we go there, we just want to know your story.
Yeah.
So when they tell us something, we should listen
Yeah.
and proceed with it. And I love the history. Sometimes they're just they're little surprises everywhere you go.
Right. Right. Well, have you been able to check out any of like the Nebraska and Eastern Nebraska weird stuff?
So I haven't done as much in Nebraska. I've been working with like Council Bluffs. I've worked with Squirrel Cage like forever.
Hell yes. Hey, I've never been there. I'm so embarrassed, and I saw you're doing a tour there, but I'm going to be out of town.
Oh my gosh! Well, you know what? Just message me and I'll just take you there. I can.
Oh my God, that's great. I'll buy you lunch. I mean,
Yes.
nothing. I will reward you somehow, but I will take you up on that.
Well, the Rails West Museum is like a mile down the road, and that place is way cooler. Well, they're both cool, but I love the Rails West. Unfortunately, it has to close during the winter
Oh,
because all the train cars are sitting outside, so it
okay.
doesn't really. But I'll take you there too. I love it over there, so I
Cool.
work with them. Um, I've been working with the York Mortuary, which is like a newer place, and it's pretty awesome. Like we've had a lot of activity and stuff there. Um,
Ooh.
yeah, it's about 2 hours from here, I think.
Yeah. Well, York's got some weirdness. There's some Bigfoot history around there, some UFO stuff too.
Yes.
York's on my weird list.
Yeah. It's definitely a weird place. I'll give you that.
Yeah.
And then I was one of the owners of the Stevenson building, but as of now, it is completely shut down. So I was there for the first couple years of it opening and things like that. So that's where he's from.
Right.
But
How long have you been like is it just since COVID you've been wandering around the Midwest?
well, I've been wandering around the country since COVID,
Right.
but I've always I guess for, I don't know, probably like 8 or 9 years now. So, something happened, I don't know how many years ago, and I got like an inheritance. And I just took my kids on this big West road trip.
Right.
Sorry, it's dry.
No, it is. I have a cough too. Yeah.
Pardon me while I die really quick.
No, that's okay.
We'll finish this by way of Ouija board.
Yeah.
But so we went west, and we just for 3 weeks we didn't plan anything, nothing. We said let's just go, and I've been an addict ever since.
Yeah.
Ever since, like I cannot get enough. So honestly, like the Midwest itself, it's like when I'm in this area, then I do stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to stay now more in this area, just because the travel has been a bit much right now with inflation and all that stuff going on. So I've kind of had to pull back a little bit.
Right.
But I've been involved with the Midwest for 8 years. I mean, the squirrel cage, when I first started going there, they had like a piece of cardboard or plywood outside with like a spray painted email and phone number, and you messaged and you hope somebody got back to you in like a month.
Oh, wow.
And so I did that little Buried Alive series that I did came from that, because this is when I first started doing this stuff, and my friend was like, make a little video, and like I made a whole episode because I have a film degree. I don't know how to make anything small.
Yeah.
And he's like, wow, this is so great. And so then I just kept doing it. But that one episode, because Nick Roth picked up, I don't know, but it landed them on Ghost Adventures, America's Most Terrifying Places. They've had people come film, what do you call it? Like music videos there now.
Hell yeah.
And then I started the ghost tours there. So
that's really cool. I've heard such great things about it, and it's one of those things. I there's like certain things in, like, when they're so close to you and so like accessible. I'm like, well, I'll do it next month. I'll go there, but I need to go. And now that I know you're doing the tours,
I'll just take you down there.
Hell yeah, that's so rad.
Whatever. I'm like, I have friends.
I'm fired up. That's great. Well, maybe I'll try to put together a couple. Brian Corey.
They do, yes.
Yeah, I'll get Brian a couple of us. Maybe we'll all go, go down, then we'll go grab dinner or lunch or something like that.
That would be so much fun. I would enjoy that. It would be amazing.
Me too. Well, so not growing up in the Midwest, but now being in the Midwest for a long time and getting a feel and a handle about it. Is it me, or is there something extra spooky? Maybe not necessarily like Omaha or Kansas City or some of the cities, but like the rural Midwest has got a vibe. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do, and I think it's because this is the center of everything, doing the research, I found a lot of things like, the mob railroad there was one railroad owned by the mob, and it went from New York City all the way down to LA, but it went through the tiny little town of Wymore where the Stevenson building was. And so that ended up being a major hub. Wymore was considered Sin City.
Yeah.
Before Sin City was Sin City,
Right.
So it was like this huge thing. And so there was a lot of activity. I mean, you even think about like Chicago, because I grew up, mainly in Chicago.
Uh-huh.
And my grandfather-in-law owned a sub shop where he bootlegged liquor for Al Capone. He had like old wine presses in his basement.
Oh, wow.
Things like that. So a lot of the activity from all of those days happened in the Midwest, and then it spread out everywhere, because why wouldn't it? You can do all your business here, and it's easier to access every other place all around the country.
Right.
Which is kind of why I live here, because it's easier to be here, and you can go anywhere easier than whatever. So all of this activity and everything stems really from the Midwest.
You're so right. I like that. That's a great point of view. You brought up a town called Wymore, and I am fascinated with Wymore because Wymore has, like, I think 2 sort of famous-ish haunted locations. But there's also, like you said, there's a weird history. There was a lot of like rioting between like mineral miners back then, and there was a whole, because people, the train went right through there, so it was a hub of commerce. But there was all kinds of like rival gangs. Like it's a weird kind of violent history.
Yeah.
But also there was this huge influx of Welsh people coming.
Yes.
Coming there.
The Welsh Center.
Right. And they have a very interesting folklore and mythology that I like wonder sometimes is like, this is getting kind of woo-woo, but like, I feel like, when people like, go to a new place, they always bring their belief systems and their folklore and their mythology with them. And I wonder if some of that rubbed off in Weimar. Like
you know what? It probably did because Weimar is still crazy. I was actually just there last weekend because I just have like such a great group of friends there now. I go there as often as I can. But I think the other building you're talking about is probably the one that was on the Dead Files.
mm,
The house. My friend Keith actually lives at it's the house I stay at when I'm out there.
really?
Yeah, I literally have the mirror from the episode sitting to my left. Um, so
So what's your take on that house? Is it
so I don't know if you're aware of this, but was it 2 years? I think 2 years ago, maybe three. It burned down,
oh.
and so Keith did not want to give the house up.
Uh-huh.
So by himself, this tiny little dude tore apart the inside until it was nothing but the stone shell. That's all it was, and he's been rebuilding it, and he's gotten, like I have my own bedroom there too. So he's like, "Your bedroom's done." So like as of now, I think all he really has to do is like put in the actual flooring, and he has to do like the plaster on the walls and things like that. But like he put the heat in, he did all the electrical work. I think he had one person come out with plumbing.
Wow.
He was able to get a new roof on there. He had to have someone come do windows, but he literally tore that place out piece of wood by piece of wood on his own and
Good
rebuilt
God.
the entire inside. It's incredible.
Well, so do you think there was like legitimate activity there before? And my second part to that question is, has the activity, if it was there, is it still there, or because of the rebuilding of it board by board? I wonder if that affected anything, if there was something to begin with.
Well, I do think that there was stuff there beforehand. Keith will tell you that there's nice things there now. I will say there's been a time or two that I may have seen like a shadow figure or something, but it's very peaceful. Like I've never, and it's weird because Keith will tell me stories about how he was this asshole and blah blah blah, blah, and he is one of the sweetest, kindest. I'm like, I could never picture him being a mean person. And he's
Mm-hmm.
like, well, since Amy came out and did all this and they helped me, and he's now part of the spirit mechanics. He's like, I'm not that way anymore.
Right.
And I do think there are still maybe some things kind of lingering in the house, but nothing bad anymore.
What is a spirit mechanic?
They're the people who they're like a team that Amy Allen works with. So when people still need help, like after she's been on the show, she would send her team to go help them. And so that's
Whoa.
kind of part of, yeah, he's part of that. So,
Oh my God. A spirit. They should, if they had degrees in spirit mechanics, I would go back to college.
wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah, I love that
Right.
term. I love that term. Too bad I can barely change a tire, so I don't think I'd be very good at this job.
But,
I wanted to ask you. So, like, what are some of the the places in Kansas? Because I know you've been to Kansas that you've found interesting and kind of have come away with saying, like, because I'm sure there's there's many places that claim to be haunted or have
yeah.
paranormal activity. That doesn't mean they all do, right? Like, but like, have there been places in Kansas that you found like this feels pretty genuine? There feels like there's something going on here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really go to Kansas as much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely think Hotel Josephine had some stuff going on. I loved living there, and I
Right.
love being a part of that. Like, it's really just a sad thing when you lose a place, but they definitely I mean, I had stuff happen with people there and without people there, So I definitely like Josephine was like one of my top places. Um,
Where is that located?
it was in Holton,
Oh,
Kansas.
okay, sure. That's not far
Yeah.
away from Omaha, really, right?
No, it isn't. I think it's 2.5 hours,
Oh,
maybe.
easy.
So it's not. Yeah, it's not too bad. But I've been to Sally House a few times, and I never really, there was not really a whole lot there. I know a lot of people, and I don't mean to say nothing is haunted or
Yeah.
isn't. I just think it depends on who's there. For me,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like I was so comfortable there always. I only ever had one thing happen there where I had it on camera where one of the balls was moved up in the kids' room, and it was like a significant move, like it actually rolled. It didn't,
Right. Right. Ooh.
kind of maybe. It was pretty. I mean, it really actually happened there. So,
Right.
but I don't really know that I've explored Kansas all that much. I spent a lot
Uh-huh.
of time more in like Missouri and Iowa. So,
Ooh,
yeah.
interesting. Well, I would ask the same question about Iowa.
Well, Iowa's definitely Edinburgh Manor by far is like,
Uh-huh.
I think Edinburgh is probably on the top of my list.
Where is that again?
That is in Monticello, Iowa, or Scotch Grove. I
Gosh.
think it's Monticello is like kind of like a division verb thingy.
Would you know where is that like southern Iowa? Like where is that in the state? I can't.
It is 5 hours from here.
Oh, okay,
So
so it's far, or maybe east.
basically, yeah, probably like middle Iowa, maybe.
Okay.
But yeah, the owners are awesome. I love the owners. But and but yeah, that's what I was on Destination Fear for, is for my experiences there, and the things I caught on camera there were just insane. The people that I've taken there since then have all had like crazy experiences. The thing about Edinburgh though is I've had all these experiences happen. I was like, you know what, I'm going to go there by myself now. And so I did, which, people are like, don't do that. And I'm like, I ain't worried about it. Jay's always on property. So,
Right.
And the only thing that happened that night was Jay kept popping up behind me. And he's the owner, and he's just like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
He just gets a kick out of scaring me, which is great. But I was so disappointed. I'm like, this stuff will happen when everyone's around. I thought for sure going by myself, like maybe it would open up some more or whatever, and it didn't. And I was like, this is just crazy. But that is the one and only time I've ever been there that something didn't happen.
So is there like a lore behind this this place? Like what do people report? Is it just kind of like garden variety, like stuff moves or doors and?
I think it's just people do see a lot of shadow figures there.
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten a lot of EVPs there.
Mm-hmm.
You can hear footsteps, doors opening and closing. Like we have a lot of that on film too. Like I have it on camera where it sounds like somebody literally jumps out of a closet and is like,
whoa.
Yeah, it used to be like and I'm just like, what the hell?
Yeah.
I'm having a rough night. That is the one and only place I think I've ever been to where my behavior did not match me at all. There was a point where I was just kind of yelling and like freaking out, whatever. And I don't even know why. Even like watching it, I felt so bad. I was like, why am I acting like that? And even my friends, like, watching the videos of when I wasn't even, there, I was outside, and they're like, what is wrong with her? Like, we're genuinely concerned. We've never seen her like this. So there's, but it's a place that was full of, I guess, unwanted people who weren't wanted in town. They were seen as, less than perfect. And so they were sent there. But not only that, but criminals. And so you just have this mix of, outcasts and people who are mentally ill and everything else all thrown into this one place. Like, how is that not going to be a negative effect?
Right.
So, it's just a cool place.
Yeah, that's fin. I did not know about this place. I will readily admit that like I am much more like knowledgeable about like the ufological history of the Midwest and probably the cryptid history, and I'm now starting to learn more about these haunted places, but like which I find fascinating, and it excites me because I'm like, oh, I have a list of places to go that are not far at all, that are easy to get to.
Yes, well,
you can drive there and back.
Malvern's really close to us too. It's like 40 minutes.
I did go there. Josh, Hurd, what's his Hurd? Is his last name? He's a really nice guy. Yeah, he gave me like a private tour during the day, mind you. And I'll admit, I was horrified. He made me walk down that one like dark. There's like this hallway that has like a lot of activity with like shadow people, whatever. And it was during the day. I walked down there and I like honestly like just looked down at my feet. I didn't even want to like look to my periphery. So I'm like, I'm sure I'm gonna see something and I'm not ready for it.
If I was alone with Josh Hurd in a hallway, I'd be terrified too.
I need to have him on the show to talk about Malvern. But Malvern, what's your take on Malvern?
I actually really love Malvern. I've had a lot of good activity there as well. Like we did one of the episodes there for Buried Alive too. And like one of the best things was like, because I would just film the tour. But I was picking up EVPs on the tour. We weren't even trying, like, as you like see me walking down the hallway and, one of the people on my team, they're behind me and I'm just kind of walking forward and I hear someone say like, let me out. And I'm like thinking it's Devin messing with me. And I turn around and I'm laughing. I'm like, what did you say? Like, nothing. I thought that was you. And I was like, no, that wasn't me. And then the guy in front of me turned around and he was like, I thought that was you guys. And we're like, no.
Right.
And so later looking back at it, we're like, clearly it wasn't any of us. But then we had another day. We were in the middle of the day. We're out there and it was me and Devin and our other friend. And so I'm like, upstairs in the middle, and Devin is like way down brother, and the other guy's downstairs, like in the shadow hallway. And he says something like, if you want me to know you're here, you're going to have to make a real loud noise. And you just hear boom. It was
What?
so loud, the whole building shook. And we captured on everything that we had. So when I put the episode together, I put each and every one of those cameras and recorders, the sound in there. I was like, we caught it on like 5 different things. It was so loud and so scary that like all you see is like us running. Like, did somebody fall down the stairs?
Good
like
God.
We went running to make sure the other ones of us were okay, because none of us were near each other.
Holy smokes.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
And I know a few years ago, like the grocery store that was like adjacent to it, like burned down. It almost burned down the whole town.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, like I'm like, oh, that Malvern energy.
Oh my goodness.
That's interesting, because there's not really like a narrative attached to that place so much, is there?
Not really. I mean, again, that's, it's one of these things where, I mean, there's a lot of people in and out of it, but it was also like a nursing home. So I mean, there are some stories, and I know they don't talk a lot about it, just because some of those people and those families are still around, which
Right.
is a very respectful thing to
Totally.
do. And so I mean, there are some stories about some negative things that have happened there, but when you get into nursing homes and things, like, when you're always going to have deaths, you're always going to have crazy stories that come with it, and it's been around for a very long time. And I believe that because it's by the Nishnabotna River, and so that whole river system and the railroad system, whatever, they're all kind of connected with these small towns that go through like Kansas and Iowa. And I'm pretty sure that it's the same railroad that went through like Wymore and things like that as well.
Interesting.
Which that railroad in particular carried a lot of like orphan train kids and gangsters, mobsters, you name it. Some of the worst. I know that same, it actually goes through, I want to say it's the one that goes through here, but like one of the first moving car robberies on a train car with Jesse James happened along that same railroad, but I want to say it was more towards Kansas. I need to double check on that, because I've been saying it the last couple of days. I'm like, I might be wrong. But
I feel like you're right, because I know Jesse James was in court, like went to like, I think was accused of murdering somebody, and like I think like by all accounts he did. And then somehow like escaped the courtroom. But there's some lore about Jesse James being arrested and tried for murder, but then he like bolts and gets out of there. Like,
yeah, there was I believe it was in Kansas somewhere, where they have like the first like bank robbery, and I think he was a part of that. And there was like a shooting, and like it was like a relative of his or something that got shot. I don't remember going there, but it's been a minute, and like I sucked it all in, but obviously not permanently. I have to go back and check my facts, but I don't get into that specific bank.
Well, and when you get into some of these like local cowboy legends, like you're not really sure what's folklore and what's real, because like, there's a ton of folklore with all these people because they became folk heroes, and so we don't know. So some of these like crimes may be attributed to them, but they may have had nothing to do with it.
Exactly. Plus, I mean, when you think about those times too, when you're robbing trains, people were also stealing identities.
Totally.
It's very easy for me to just become somebody else. I could steal your entire fortune, kill your whole family, and then go live as you somewhere else, and nobody would know the difference. And you notice, and this is one thing that I've noticed, like some of these people, these very wealthy people, like Wymore, for example. So Stevenson, who owned the building, after Wymore, he bought it from Wymore. And so when he owned the building, he also became like the head of the bank. I forget what they call him, but there's no photos of this guy.
Really?
Not one. The bank, the president. So the bank has a photo of every single president except him. And it's like, why? Yeah, and he came from mob territory, and his wife came from mob territory. So, I mean, there's a lot of question there. So, and I start thinking about a lot of that, like how many of these people, when you think about these big, rich families that leave behind these mansions and all this horrible stuff happens, right? How many photos can you actually find of the owner, especially the male owner? You usually cannot.
Interesting. Ooh, I like the way your brain's working. This is
good. Working. I don't really know about
that. Well, are there any other like investigations in Nebraska that you have found quite intriguing? I know you mentioned the mortuary in York, and I would love to hear about that because I do not know about that.
So it's an old it's now an antique store.
Okay,
And so
scary antiques are
let's take
scary.
out the antique store. But it's 3 stories. So it has the basement and the main floor, which is the antique store, and then the upstairs is the mortuary. Well, it's just empty,
Mhm.
but it still has like one of the gurneys in there. It has the old elevator, and we've actually had people come in there who are like, "Hey, like my family had my grandma's funeral here, and this and that, whatever." So it's kind of weird when all these like town people like come in. Um, but it just has a lot of activity. And what I found at the mortuary, which I find to be very strange, and maybe it's because it's a mortuary, when we investigate there, it seems to me that the activity actually comes with the people who come in.
Oh,
So it seems to be like a place where relatives come through, which I find fascinating because I've
right.
never really had that happen. And I've been trying to do it now at other locations because I'm like, I don't understand this. Maybe that's where all the activity comes from in the first place. I don't really know. But it just seems so fascinating to me. I mean, we've had people in tears like, oh my God, that's my grandpa.
Well, it's almost like the location is the medium for whoever comes in there. That I've never heard of that in my entire life. I think that is absolutely fascinating.
It has been fascinating. I like some of the things. I guess the biggest thing that happened was I don't do the Estes method like normal people for
Hmm.
events. I just don't anymore because
Hmm.
it's just always caused issues. So I just don't.
Hmm.
So what I do is I'll have like the whole group of people, and I'll take half the group in one room, and that half is only listening to the spirit box, and they're only pulling out what they hear. And then I take the other half and put them somewhere where they can't hear us getting answers, and they're just asking the questions. And so we're getting answers to questions they're asking somewhere else in the building. And so the first time I ever decided to do it this way, um, one of the words we came up with from the spirit bots was Papa Squat. Like, how did that, right? I'm like, and several of us heard it. And then when we went back and we were talking about it, like we'd asked a favorite color, whatever. And this girl is just sitting there crying. She's like, that's my grandpa. And then she asked another question, like, tell me something. It was something like, tell me something only I would understand. The answer was Papa Squat. And she just starts bawling even harder.
Oh,
She's like, that's like a fishing term or something that he used to say all the time. And I'm like, I had no idea. I just thought it meant have a seat.
oh, that is
Yeah,
wild.
it's fascinating. And I was just like, this is just the craziest thing ever.
Oh my God, that is really that's what I mean, but that is really. I'll tell you what, the whole coming in there and then like the location is co-creating almost with the people coming in there. It almost seems like like it's taking from their, I mean, subconscious or whatever, like for lack of a better term, and interacting with them, or like something is coming through them that's related to them ancestrally or whatever. That is so interesting. I don't think I've ever heard of that.
It's crazy. And and then I now have this, it's like a little alien box. So it's just it had mints in it, and it's just a little tin. And so I started putting things in it, like
Hmm.
random things that only I know what's in there. I don't tell anybody else. And so we'll do spirit box or EVP and try to get what's in there. And I just started doing this, but the mortuary was the first place. Like, and of course, my daughter's the one who heard it, and I was like, now they're going to think I'm a fraud. But I, like, she had no idea that I even. So there were two things in there, and so she first picked up a coin, and I said, "What kind of coin?" Thinking she would say like quarter or dime, and she said a brothel coin, and that's exactly what was in there. Was a brothel coin from Tombstone. And
What?
then she heard nails, but I had little snails in there, so I was like, maybe it was snails.
That is wild.
Yeah, so now I have a new thing in the box that nobody else knows what's in the box. So we're going to try it again elsewhere.
How long has this place been known for activity?
Um, I want to say I've been involved with it for like 2 years now, maybe. It's
But
kind
that
of
seems really fresh then. So had they just kind of discovered that there's paranormal manifestations there?
yeah. She basically because she just owns the antique store, and she used to rent the building next to it, and then her mom owns the one next to this. Her mom has a thrift store, and then there's like these two other little buildings, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And she rented one at the antique store, and she started moving. She's like, well, I don't want to rent someone else's bill. I'm just moving my own. And so she was in the process of starting to move everything over. And she was already having activity in the other building because they're like all those attached ones, you know,
Right.
like the old whatever. And she was having activity in there, which she's like accrediting it to the antiques, which maybe. But as she was moving stuff over, it started getting worse and worse. And so she put on Facebook, she's like, I need some.
Yeah.
Because she's not a paranormal person.
Right.
She is now, however.
Yeah.
And so a friend of mine saw it. She's like, oh my God, Christy, we got to go check this out. I said, okay. So she let us come out there and whatever. And it's just kind of grown a bit from there. So I'm like, well, let's see where this goes.
Right.
And it's been quite the adventure. And everyone I've taken on that event, I think sells out more than any of them.
Man, I got to go do that. I'll tell you what, I'm excited to do every tour you have around this area. I'll be a great client.
Good. Just know we stop for the winter because no one's buying around Christmas and Thanksgiving and nobody cares.
I could put together a group and we, I'll tell you what, we'll hire you to do a small private tour.
Works, if that's
yeah, why not? Why not? We'll create our own thing. Let me ask you this question, and you don't have to answer it if you don't want to. Had you had any kind of paranormal or, experiences prior to like really throwing yourself into this stuff 7 years ago?
I always kind of denied that kind of thing, but like as I've gotten older and more into this, I'm kind of like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that I've had a lot of things happen. One of the things that I don't really talk about it much really at all is I've had a lot of dreams. I've had dreams that come true all the time. I think it's something that's happened, and my daughter is now starting to tell me about it. She's 24, and then things like that. But I will say that after my husband passed away, weird things were happening. Like my wedding rings would just appear on the dresser.
Really?
The lights in my dad's, because I couldn't sleep in my room. I'd have to sleep in the living. I was too terrified to sleep in my bedroom. So I'd be sleeping in the living room with like all the lights on and the TV on, and he had this track lighting, and you could physically see the light switch for the track lighting going dimmer and brighter, dimmer and brighter.
What?
I had a candle that just lit by itself on the TV. And I'm like yelling at the kids, like, who did that? And they were 2, 4, 5, and 6 when he passed away. And they're all looking at me like, we can't even use a lighter.
Oh my God.
And I'm just like, who did that? And so I go over there and I look, and there was no melted wax in it. So it had just happened. Eventually I was like, Brian, knock it off. You're freaking me out.
Yeah.
And it's never happened. Like ever since then, it just stopped. And I'm okay with that. I don't want him doing stuff. I want him to leave me alone.
I mean, when you like stop and like really like deconstruct that fire appearing, like lighting a candle by itself, that is so. I mean, that's extraordinary.
It freaked me out.
Yeah.
I don't even think about it being extraordinary. It freaked me out. I'm like, here I am, like. I'm sitting there, getting my kids because we were going somewhere and it was colder out, and they're all babies, so I'm like bundling them up and getting them ready to go out in the cold, and I look over and the candle's on, and I'm just like, that's bullshit.
Oh my Lord. I see like, but it's interesting because you can, I mean, maybe I'm wrong about this, but like now that you're like, hey, I'll just go to, it's not called Monticello, but I'm going to call it Monticello, the one in Iowa. What's it called? Oh, why am I saying Monticello?
Monticello.
Oh, it's in there you go. There you go. Close, right?
Close,
Terrible names. But like now you're like, oh, I'll just go there by myself, even though people are saying don't do that. So there has been like in a pretty short period of time, like now you seem, I mean, I don't want to say fearless. I'm sure some aspect scares you, but you're not afraid to go poking the bear.
I'm not. And you know what? The reason for that is, and I've experienced some pretty incredible things. Beatty Mansion, which you've probably heard of.
Did you say Baby Mansion?
Yeah, Beatty.
Oh, Beatty. I think it said baby. I'm like, well, this is terrifying. I'm scared of ghost babies.
I'm going to buy a mansion now. That's
okay. Trust me, it would do well because that's the most horrifying thought. Oh, yeah, like ghost babies everywhere. Beatty Mansion? No, I don't know about this. Where is this?
It's in St. Joe, Missouri. It's only a couple hours from here. Yes, it's a really cool place. But of course, it has one of those legends where it's like, there's a dark, evil shadow man down this particular hallway, blah. And, I'm like, whatever. So then I got dared to spend the night there by myself,
What
this was during COVID lockdowns. It's like, fine.
did you
Um,
do? Oh my God, you're
I did.
wild.
I did do it. So I went there by myself, and first thing I did was go down that hallway
Yeah.
into that room where they said there's this dark, evil, whatever.
Oh man.
And I started doing like, spirit box, EVP, all that stuff. And so I came up with the name Jack. And then I came up with this whole story that he was like a soldier and he was brought there and whatever. And so we had this whole story. And come to find out, very well could have been true. And I had no idea. So I was like, okay, this has to be real. So then I went back not that long after with a few, like it was 2 other friends, me and 2 other people. And we were doing another EVP session trying to reach out to this Jack again. And I was just at a point where like, I was done. I didn't want to do paranormal anymore. I was just so like in just a bad place. And so we're doing this EVP session or whatever. And I'm wearing the Lucid headphones. And so I heard like this tiny little noise. I couldn't really make out what it was. I was like, well, let's go back and listen to it. And here it was, the best EVP I'd ever caught that says never give up.
Oh.
It is so clear that we had to go and rewatch everybody's live feed to make sure nobody was talking because it sounded like a person sitting
Right.
there. So I'm just like, I play this thing for people and I'm like, that's the EVP because it sounds like a person. And it's so defined and it's phenomenal.
What's interesting, Christy? There's like a motif that keeps on popping up when you're talking about the experiences, and that is personal interactions that are catered to you or somebody, a person you're taking a tour on. And maybe this is really well known in the ghost investigating world. I admittedly do not know a ton about it, but this is really interesting to me because I sort of feel like potentially the UFO phenomenon is sort of the same way, where it's more personal than people let on. And it is somewhat, maybe, I'm saying maybe because I don't have any evidence, a co-creation bias. I kind of feel that with all high strangeness manifestations, individual, the person is required.
Yes. You know what? I kind of think that too. And like the whole premise of, like what I'm trying to get people to understand is what we've lost in general is this great human connection.
Uh-huh.
Because whether we like it or not, they talk about what are the trees? No, for some reason, escaping my mind. They say that it's the biggest living organism on Earth.
Oh, the redwoods?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's wrong because I think that we all are just one big living organism.
Right.
We're all made out of the same stuff. It just manifests differently. And we're all the same energy. And we always talk about how we can feel each other's energy and whatever. I'm like, but we're not even using that. We don't do anything with it. And, the first law of energy is energy can neither be created nor destroyed. So therefore, because we are energy, no matter what form we're in, we're still here. We can't leave. It's impossible. There's no way, shape, or form for that to actually happen.
Right.
And so when we pass on, we're still energy. We're still there.
Right.
And we're still connected because we're all the same thing.
Right.
Literally. So whether you're alien or Bigfoot, it doesn't matter. None of that matters. And I think as human beings, we've come to this egotistical place where we think we're outside of it all. But once we find our way back into it, I think that's when things get better. I think that's when we discover things that we didn't know were there. And when we explore, that's where things become very real, is when we decide to put ourselves back where we actually belong.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Wow, you have a really neat point of view about all this stuff.
Just have a weird brain.
Well, I mean, it comes with experience. No, but I feel like part of what we can do is, I'm one of those big believers where I think speculating with other researchers and people is good. I think thought experiments are good. We'll never, I believe, have the answer. We won't one day think like in 2037 go like, ha, we know what ghosts are, folks. Or UFOs. Like, I really don't think it's like a knowable thing. I think it's
like it would suck if we knew.
I also agree there. Like, I think, well, God, what would be like? What would I do at night? Like, what would I research and read about? Like, it would kill my hobby. My podcast would be over.
bitch. But
Yeah, exactly right. But it is also interesting, and I want to ask. Boy, this is like going to seem like a harsh segue, but it really isn't, because I feel like I'm now starting to get a feel for your process when you investigate stuff, and I would like to know what it's been like working on some of these paranormal TV shows. And do you feel like you're allowed to kind of like, I know you've done the independent ones yourself where you're in full control, but I've experience with TV, and I know you're working for a TV show, you're working for a corporate entity. And how has your experience been in doing honest investigation with like in a TV show?
I do love, like, I love film. It's always been
Hmm.
like my number one thing. And I do think that people fail to recognize like it's a reality TV show.
Right.
I mean, I'm just going to put it out there. Even Judge Wapner was scripted. Okay.
It's all scripted. Yes. Yes, of
Exactly.
course.
Like none of it is actually real. And so I feel like you have to decipher between entertainment and reality. And of course, there's always like somewhat of reality in there,
Right.
And when I filmed for Most Terrifying Places, they moved what happened to me down on the cell floor because it happened up in the apartment at the squirrel cage. And they're like, it'll look more interesting. And I'm like, yeah, that's fine. The story's the same. What happened is still the same. I mean, it's still the same story. They didn't embellish it. So to me, I'm like, that's cool. They're just documenting.
Right.
Working with Destination Fear, I did more. I told my story once again. It was and that was the thing, is I told my story about what happened to me there, and I told them the history and things like that, which they didn't change that. They did not change anything that I talked about.
That's wonderful.
What they did on the investigation was what they chose to do and how they wanted to do things. And again, like, it's TV, and you have to remember, like, we're going in there, and I might be at it when we filmed, we would at least, 2 or 3 days, but then we compile it and make it look like we're there for 5 hours.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah.
We're just taking the best parts and cramming it into, 30 to 45 minutes.
Of course.
The TV shows are there for, 2 or 3 days as well. And they're getting B-roll and they're, whatever. And so they have to cram it in. But at the end of the day, if they don't have ratings, they don't have a show and they aren't making money. And that's something that needs to be understood.
I agree.
I do think that a lot of people feel like, they destroy the paranormal, whatever. And it's kind of a give and take, if you ask me. It's double-edged sword, right? Because they brought a lot of like light to the subject. I mean, they've made a lot of people have the ability to save these old buildings and like all this stuff.
And so, preserving the history too, which is really important, I think.
Because that takes money. Unfortunately, it also harms it, because then you have irresponsible people who want to walk into locations and go, everything's a demon. And I'm
yeah. You're always going to get those dudes, though. We can't, as much as we want to try to shake them, those dudes are out there.
Yeah, they are. So I think anybody just needs to be mindful of what the TV shows are, what they mean. I filmed with Zach Beggins, and like I gave him the actual footage, and he threw it out and used what he wanted to.
Perfect. Sounds on brand.
Whatever, the real footage is way better.
Right.
Decided on, but it is what it is, and the stories will always be the stories, but people just have to be mindful and understand the difference between TV and reality, and that's it.
Absolutely. And I don't think there is anything wrong with entertainment. Like, I guess if I had to call, like, what is my podcast? I'm not a scholar. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a professional paranormalist, if that's even a thing. But I am an entertainer, and I find this stuff entertaining. But we can talk about it in a way that's honest, truthful, and maybe we can, discover some new ideas. Yeah. But at the end of the day, I look at my show and I look at all this stuff is entertaining to me. When I'm reading a Jacques Vallée book about, UFOs and the fairy faith, like, that is entertainment to me. It's entertaining me, my intellectual mind. So that's okay.
It is okay. And like some of these shows, they make you think, whether, like, how am I investigating? Like, am I, sometimes you need to see what you shouldn't be doing to know what you should be doing.
Right.
And so like they really make you think, and they make you, put things into perspective. And, a lot of people will be like, I can't believe you go into buildings alone. And I'm like, it's because I don't believe all that. It's that whole thing, like, voodoo is only real if you believe in it. It's that kind of thing.
I think, gosh, you're actually like demystifying like the fear factor of these things for me. You're right. You're like, well, if I go in and I'm all scared, well, that's probably the experience I'm going to have.
I mean, and it is, right? But
yeah.
and I believe that in everything. I tell people all the time, the number one most important thing in this world is love. Love overcomes everything. Everything.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing that it cannot fix because it gets rid of selfishness and fear. I mean, just everything. And so if you go into a place caring, you're going to get a better reaction than if you go in there, come at me, bro. I'm like, if I hit your mouth like that, you're hitting me in the face with a frying pan and calling 911. You're not going to light up my REM pod.
Right. Right. Well, it's funny. And I don't know how much you lurk in these other fields, but like the Bigfoot field, the UFO field, for sure. It really is like a mix of really great people and really toxic people.
Yeah.
And people who were really, in my opinion, just peddlers of fear. And I'm like, man, that is and it bugs me. I know I shouldn't care so much, but I do love the topic of UFOs so much and what it means and what it represents potentially. But when people use it as this like conspiratorial fear thing, I'm like, good Lord, you are missing the point and the fun of this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, chill out, people.
Exactly. I actually I'm super into like aliens, but a lot of the stuff is because my dad's always kind of been into it. But I've never really like done a lot of research on my own. I've been out to Area 51 a few times.
Right.
I've been out there so much that the people at the little alien are like, Christie's here.
Well, one day I'll take you on in about like a few hours, you can go to like 3 different pretty famous UFO landing sites in our area. One is in Ashland, Nebraska, the Herbert Schirmer case, Big Lake Park case. Oh yeah. I'll show you where some of these. We'll do a paranormal exchange tour.
Let's do it. I'm so down for that.
Situation.
Awesome.
Oh, you froze up. Are you there?
What happened?
Oh, hello. Hold on.
Am I here still?
Yeah. I got you now. Sorry, it was a freeze up for a second.
That's okay. I was trying to connect. I'm like, my internet's fine. What's happening?
Yeah, no, these things, they're whatever.
Heather, have you ever met Heather Taddy? Have you met her?
Heather who?
Heather Taddy.
No.
She's like super into like the whole alien thing. She was on, I believe, Paranormal State.
Right. Is she a Nebraska person?
She's not she's in Pittsburgh. So she was on Paranormal State with Katrina and Ryan Buell, I think like way back. Like they're the OGs. But she does a lot of the conventions and stuff. And she's been a guest on Portals to Hell a couple of times, and now she has the Travel the Dead with Katrina on YouTube. But she's super to the alien stuff. Like she's getting me more into it. Let's just say I Photoshop her face on aliens.
Yeah.
But she's super. She's if you're into aliens, she's someone you definitely want to talk to because she's.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm just a UFO nerd for life. I love the ephemera. I love what they look like, but I don't truck in any of that like weird like fear paranoia that some of these people are peddling. I don't like it, and I think it's. I think they're missing the point, man.
I don't want to be afraid of my hobby. Okay.
No, it's just also such negativity. Like it's also like I mean. It won't get political, but it's really like hard right and scary, like weird.
Yeah, we don't need any of that.
I don't need any of that junk, man. I don't no Nazi stuff for me. Pass. No. I'm out on that. I'm gonna circle back, and this is gonna sound like the weirdest question.
Okay.
But this is how my mind works. When you were spending the night at, I can't remember the name of the place. I'm so bad.
Beatty?
Yeah, Beatty, when you were by yourself the first night, you first time you did it, I would think of it as like I'm going camping, right? And what is it when you were talking about the first question that popped in my mind is like, what do you take for dinner and snacks? Because obviously you may not have a refrigerator on like what's the food situation? My mind goes when you're by yourself on an investigation.
I actually did that during COVID lockdown, so I don't even remember. That's how long ago.
Right.
I don't remember what I took for food. Probably just like snacks from the gas station or something.
Sure.
I never like bring whole meals with me anywhere. Sometimes we'll do investing. People will bring like it's like potluck dinner with like chili and whatever, and I'm like, wow, you like overdid it. Now I found out that I have celiac disease, so I literally just don't eat.
Oh God, that's I will say I know a couple people with celiac, and it's a good time to be celiac. or have that disease, because there gluten-friendly options are out there now.
If you want to pay $6 a donut.
Yeah, God, they'll always get
This
you.
is my fault though, because one day I said, "God, let me lose weight." He said, "Here, now you can't eat cake."
You're like, what? No, not like that. Don't be cruel.
I can't be mad. I got what I asked.
Oh man, I guess we always have to be specific.
If you're not going to work out, then you can't have cake.
Exactly. Oh man, what a bummer. That's no fair. That is
so
no
silly.
fair.
It makes people laugh. That's all I care
Yeah,
about.
yeah. That's true. That's true. I want to ask you this. So, and I feel like you have kind of dropped some patterns, but with all these places in the Midwest, and I guess I just want to kind of focus on the Midwest. Have you noticed any like patterns? Whether that is geographical, like it's next to a body of water, blah blah blah, or just like any sort of patterns or motifs that kind of keep on popping up that is raising your curiosity.
I definitely have noticed the water thing. And I've done some experiments with that. Like I now have like a big water fountain, like a tabletop one that I bring somewhere because I feel like the water, the generating of energy does help. But I also do see this pattern of, I guess so my dad was in construction, and so he was like an estimator and he worked with blueprints and stuff. And so I've learned a lot about buildings and how they're built. And now like you can look at certain buildings, and there's a lot of them in the Midwest that kind of stuck around from certain periods of time. And so when you walk in there, you can almost tell exactly what's happened in those places by looking at the structures of the buildings.
Right.
You can tell how wealthy people were. You can tell how, like kind of how they lived their lives. For instance, like many closets was a sign, I guess, of having money or people wanting to make it look like they have money. So the more closets they had, it was a status symbol.
Really?
The Stevenson building had a couple of rounded walls. And you'll also see those rounded walls, the same ones at the Washoe Club, which is in Virginia City, Nevada. And that was the Millionaires Club. So that just tells you those rounded walls were also a sign of like, of wealth. They were more expensive to make, because they had to bend the wood and things like that. So there's a lot of things that you can tell by looking at the buildings specifically in the Midwest, kind of what they were used for, or, what the people were like when they lived there. I don't even know if I could ever really teach anybody all of that or explain it in full detail. I just know that when I go into these buildings, like I can look at the ceiling and I can say, okay, well, this was, pretty much from this time period. And these were the kind of people that would have lived here. I think we have so much like that mob activity and gangsters. I mean, that's such a huge part. Not only that, but, what people don't really talk about is that the KKK was pretty big in the Midwest too.
Was it really? I did not know that.
Weimar was big for it.
Was it really?
Yes, it was. The historian got mad at me, and I think that's another pattern that you will see in these small towns. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about their negative history or their negative past, and a lot of it is, I think, because they still have relatives there. But those, that the Odd Fellows was huge in the Midwest, and that came from, sort of the KKK thing when it was no longer okay. Then they started the Odd Fellows, and then it just kind of grew into whatever. So
I did not know that those two groups were associated at all. Actually,
they are and they aren't, right?
Yeah.
Like, so it's kind of like one of those things where they eventually got out of control, and became the negative entity that they were. And the people who did not want to partake in that anymore, like broke off and were starting,
right,
the thing that they wanted it to be. Because unfortunately, sometimes when you have good intentions with certain things, it can turn into the most horrible thing that ever happened.
Yeah.
And so the good people who are still a part of it are like, no, we're not doing this anymore. We're just going to go do our own thing.
Right.
So that's kind of how that works. Because I don't want people to think like, oh, they're just bad, because that's not the case.
Yeah.
But people will misconstrue anything.
Right.
But things kind of evolve like in that manner.
Interesting.
All of the time. Yeah. Like so the orphan train kids, which is huge in the Midwest. I've actually met people who have had grandmothers who were orphan train kids. So, people were just putting their kids on trains and sending them off because they couldn't afford them and hoping that they would get adopted. And that's why we had so many like young children in the industrial, like, 4 and 5-year-olds running around the streets with nowhere to live and no families.
Oh God.
And it sounds horrible, right? But it's because of that we have the adoption system and the social services that we have today. Those orphan trained kids are responsible for forming that.
That is really interesting. Yeah. I did not know. I mean, I guess I should have known because the Union Pacific goes, cuts right through Nebraska, obviously. Mm-hmm. That the orphan train thing, I did not know that was such a prevalent thing here in Nebraska.
Yeah. Somebody actually wrote me a real nasty message one time, being like, "That was never a thing." So I just sent her all the newspaper articles.
Yeah.
New orphans coming into town on the train.
Right.
Like, here you go.
Right. Well, and I mean, Omaha was, it became such a wealthy town because of the train system and the river system being, river town. So like so many things, like you said, like, the New York mob basically moved into Omaha back in the early, turn of the century. And, I think it's the Chicago mob and the Kansas City mob were connected. So Kansas City and Omaha were fighting. Like it was a wild time back then.
I think what people also miss too is like, Kansas. So where I was at in Fulton, Kansas, they're right on the line with Liberty. Jesus, that's what happens when you turn your heat on.
Yeah.
But they were right on the line where the South and the North divided during the Civil War. So that line has such a lot of loss and wars and families breaking up. Like it's one of the worst areas. I mean, we always think about Gettysburg, which had so many awful things. But we missed this whole line that divided the North and South, and that was Kansas.
Did you see that was Liberty?
Liberty? Missouri. Yeah.
Liberty, Missouri. Okay, yeah. That is so interesting. This kind of segues into a question I want to ask you because, and I'm not saying this is a rule at all, but like lately, in my kind of Nebraska specifically related research, a lot of places that I feel have a lot of different manifestations of high strangeness historically are also situated close to places where there was really bad, gruesome true crime.
Yeah.
Like for instance, there's this county called Richardson County in Nebraska, which is right by Rulo, Nebraska. Rulo's in Richardson County, and I don't know if, and I'm not going to go into it too greatly because it's so horrific, but there was this cult. You know the story. This is more for the listeners. The Yahweh cult in like 1981, which was like this doomsday cult that was like, a more extreme outgrowth of the Posse Comitas, which is a militia right-wing group. Anyway, horrible things happened. But right next to there is Falls City, where and I can't remember the name of the victim, but the movie Boys Don't Cry with it was like an Oscar movie like 20 years ago.
I don't think I've heard
with
of it.
Hilary Swank. That murder happened there.
Over there, so I don't start coughing like crazy.
Right. Yeah.
All that water. Hang on.
Yeah. No, I'll vamp for a second. But folks, if you want to learn more about that, you just type in Rulo, Nebraska cult, and you'll learn all you want to know. And then I'm warning people, trigger warning. It's the worst.
I think that actually stemmed from Weimar. That guy, the leader of that cult came from Weimar.
Really?
Yeah. I was told that.
God.
I don't know how true that is. So if anybody finds information on that, I can prove that.
Right. And then, just to name one more rule of threes, there is in Mound City, which is actually in Missouri, but it's like 4 miles from Rulo, is the home of like the biggest serial killer in Missouri. So like in this little tiny, maybe 20-mile radius, 3 of the worst, most heinous crimes happen. Yet it also happens to be a place where flying wing humanoids have appeared, UFOs, cattle mutilations, Black Panthers, Bigfoot sightings, and it's also one of the most unpopulated places in Nebraska. I think it's like 8,000 people in the whole county or something like that. But I'm wondering, have you ever come across like this true crime, like high strange paranormal connection? It sounds like you have when you were talking about a lot of these things, I
don't really know that I've ever, really looked into it, I guess, from that aspect. I've never really thought about it, but I when you think about true crime, people talk about people lingering because of tragedy or whatever, but
Right.
I'm not really sure that that's the main cause. Like,
Mhm.
again, I just think we're all energy that just kind of sticks around.
Right.
But I can see, as somebody who's been through some pretty rough things, I can see how that pain it's going to come through quicker. So
Mhm.
I think if you have, like the serial killers and the things and whatever, these horrible things that have happened, even being alive, what you want is for somebody to hear your pain. So if you've
Right.
moved on, I can't imagine you wouldn't want the same thing.
Right. Right.
So it very well could be connected. But I'm just going to say that if I was an alien or a Bigfoot or something, you bet the first place I would go is the least populated area. Like, that's where
Right.
I would go. I would not want to be like, hey, look, there's New York. No thanks.
Yeah. Too many people. Too many people.
But
Well,
never really looked into that. So I'm going
yeah.
to.
Well, it's weird, and, and the thing is that as far as I can tell, the high strange aspects or manifestations were around way before Rulo and a lot of this stuff happened. So I'm like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? The paranormal stuff, like, or am I'm maybe just trying to make connections where there is not any. But there are other places in the country that I know are high strange, like, or hot spots, whatever, like window areas as they'll call them, that have so much weird, super unusual crime.
Yeah.
Like, just we baked into the geographical location. And I don't know if it means anything. I'm just, it's something I keep on noticing more and more as I look deeper and deeper into Nebraska. I'm like, huh, that's weird. This keeps on popping up.
Um,
Horrible things keep on popping up where UFOs land, like,
yeah, and you never know. I mean, when you think about, there's so many things that we don't know, we don't understand. Like,
right.
for instance, like the moon and the stars and how the universe works and
Yeah.
interacts with us. And again, that is all energy. So who knows, like, is negative things created in this spot, or are negative things attracted to this spot but created
Right.
elsewhere and they just come here?
Right.
Because there really are a lot of that, and people tell me going out to New Mexico and Arizona in the desert for the first time, people are like, there's really weird things out there. I'm like, actually, there's nobody. There's nothing.
Yeah.
I think the strangest thing that happened was I paid $8 for a toilet. That's really all I got. But you don't really find a lot of that. You do find a lot more, weirder things happening. Kind of, I can talk about, history in Illinois and Kansas. When I'm going to find, I think, a lot more interesting things. But when you look at like places like Roswell, like this one thing happens,
Yeah.
and now because it's this one thing, it stands out more than if you move to Chicago and like 8 million weird things happen.
Right.
It kind of diminishes each one, and so people don't talk about it as
Yeah,
much.
exactly. And it was something like Roswell. It's like, that is a flimsy case the more you look into it. It's like, I'm pretty sure it was a Project Mogul or something mundane that was much more convenient to say, hey, it was a flying saucer. We don't want the Russians to know about what we're doing. Like.
So I did learn this. You'll find this very fascinating. So there is a show on I don't even know what. I can't remember what it's on,
Yeah.
but it's about like these weird abandoned places in the world. And so there's actually an abandoned missile base that is it is like 30 to 45 minutes outside of Roswell, because they were talking about it. And so I started Googling like how far stuff is or whatever. And it was the time period, it was like 4 years that they had this top secret missile base, and there's still abandoned missiles out there you can go visit. But at the time period, like year two, because it was 4 years total, year two was when Roswell happened.
See, yeah.
And I started thinking, and they were also, sad story, but they were also using monkeys.
Yeah,
In
absolutely.
those missiles.
We know that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like, they're literally right there. Why
Yeah.
has nobody ever? And if you look into it, you can't really find any theories on it or any.
Yeah.
Nothing. There's nothing, because I was looking and I was like, well, no one's apparently talking about how that could be the Roswell crash.
Right. It's funny when people use, and I don't know how much they do anymore, really, but like for so long, Roswell was used as like the greatest example of like, a UFO, like a dramatic UFO evidence. And I'm like, there really was never any, like, a shred of evidence. They said it was a flying saucer, and then they recanted that, and then that is the big evidence. Like,
Yeah.
but I mean, like, when you learn more about what was going on in Roswell, and it was a very important base at the time, they were testing all kinds of things from there. So,
Yeah. Well, I spent all these years thinking, that Area 51 was so close, and I'm like, here it's like 8 hours away.
yeah, yeah.
I was like, damn, I thought it was like in half an hour, an hour, no, 8 hours.
From here? Oh no, it's a ways from here.
It's a ways from Roswell.
Oh yeah, it is a ways from. Oh, totally.
Yeah, and I was just like, wow, that was shocking. But that was like how many years ago? So I mean,
yeah. Well, both those places were really heavy in the lore in the 90s. It was all about Roswell and Area 51. But I think that's good. We're past that now because it got a little boring. I want to thank you so much for your time. I'm going to ask you one last question, if you don't mind.
Okay.
And I think we've gotten, a lot, like, you've kind of dropped some hints about this, but for my listeners, if you were to give them advice when they're going to go out and investigate a place of any high strangeness, whether it be a location where a Bigfoot, climbed up a tree and, ate a biscuit, or a place where a UFO landed, or a haunted dwelling, what kind of advice would you give my listeners?
Well, I definitely would say always be open-minded, but always, always, always. It's like if you've ever seen Disney's Monster Inc., at the end of the movie, they realize that laughter creates more energy. And so that's always the advice that I give. Go in there with sensitivity, be empathetic. Just go in there being yourself. Go in there to have fun. And if you want to interact with what's ever there, they're going to interact with you if you're a better person. I just don't be mean, be kind is what I can always say. Always be kind, not just to the dead, but to the living. It's free and it feels really good. So,
folks, I mean, that is free advice that you can take and almost apply it to anything in life. I think that's wonderful. I agree. I sign off on that. I agree wholeheartedly. Christie, you are an absolute gem of a human being. Can you please tell me, or the listeners, where they can find more of your work, please?
I just tell people Google Paragypsy. It's all one word. As soon as you see the purple logo, that's me. I'm the only one out there, so take it. But yep, just Google that and you'll find me. The Eventbrite has all my events on it, which I think I have one left for this year, but there'll be more coming up next year.
Great.
I have a Patreon. I have all that. So
right, and is there a place where we can find the videos that you make?
So they're either on the YouTube or they'll be on the Patreon.
Okay.
I think most of them are on Patreon right now. So,
great.
Yeah, definitely.
That's awesome. Well, you will find all those links in the show notes, my friends. Christie Ayers, my new buddy, and look, we're going to talk off the air about setting up a tour here.
I'm exploring with you now.
Oh yeah, well I'll show. Look, you show me the ghosty stuff, I'll show you the UFO-y stuff.
That's a deal.
I think so too. Folks, thank you so much for listening to another episode of High Strangeness. Enjoy your dinners tonight. Peace.